Alright, welcome everybody to the first how-to episode. I got a lot of requests in to do a how-to series of basically just how to play Magic. There are a bunch of people who I'm friends with who wanted to learn how to play, who were watching on stream, but had absolutely no idea what I was doing. So I decided to do this how-to video um, to kind of just explain Magic a little bit. It's going to be over a few videos because since Magic is a very complex game, I'm going to spread it out. So this video is kind of just going to go through kind of the basics, and then we'll get into gameplay a little bit. So probably the most important thing, and I guess the first kind of step to understanding Magic, is basically what is the goal of the game. So basically, both players will start at 20 life, and your goal is to get your opponent to 0 before they get you to 0. And if you're able to get your opponent to 0 before they do, you win the game. Um, and to do that, you'll be using a mixture of creatures and spells to make this happen. So now, kind of going into each color. Um, so there are 5 colors in Magic. You have white, blue, black, red, and green. Um, and in order to play those colors, you need lands in order to make that happen. So lands are what generate mana, and mana is what is used to cast spells. So let's just take some generic card that costs more than 1 mana. Okay, so let's take Concordia Pegasus, for instance. Um, this card requires 1 generic mana and then 1 white mana. So you would need 1 plains, because plains is what produces white mana, and then this 1 symbol means it can be of literally any color you want it to be. It can be black, it can be green, it can be red, it can be blue, it can be whatever. It can be a second white, if you so wish. But 1 of whatever, and then 1 required white source. Um, what's also important to note is that when it comes to lands, you can only play 1 land per turn. So kind of going into more of reading kind of the mana costs for various things. Let's take a red card. Or I guess this is fine. So Mythos of Snapdax. This requires 2 white mana. So 2 sources are produce white, and then 2 of whatever color you want it to be. Take now Blitz of the Thunder Raptor. This requires 1 red source and 1 of whatever color you want. And so that's spread out. And so that carries out through every other color and card type. Also, lands and creatures, untap at the beginning of your turn. And we'll go into untap in a little bit. So now kind of explaining kind of the main card types. So for first, we have an instant. This is Opt, which allows you to scry 1 and draw a card. We'll get into all that in a little bit as well. So when it comes to instants, so instants can be cast or played during either player's turn. So you can play it during your turn, or you can play it during your opponent's turn. And they immediately go into the graveyard after you play them. Then you have something like, take Crash Through, which is a sorcery, and sorceries can only be played during your turn. And then kind of the biggest way for winning Magic is via creatures, and creatures can also only be played during your turn. So Stormwing Entity would require you to pay 2 blue mana and 3 of whatever color you want to play this card. that's kind of, and creatures, unlike instants and sorceries, which after they're played, they go into the graveyard. Creatures, once they're played, stay in play until they either are destroyed by a spell or destroyed in combat. And so that's kind of like the basis. We're going to play this deck here. This Izzet Spells deck, to kind of show how to kind of play Magic a little bit, since has a wide range of instant sorceries, creatures, and stuff like that. There are cards in here that are specific to various sets, which can kind of complicate things a little bit, but unfortunately, as Magic has kind of grown, trying to make it as basic as possible gets a little bit more difficult. So let's just play Izzet Spells here, and hopefully we can find a match for this. Hopefully. Oh, here we go. Alright, so the first few turns. So when you're getting your opening hand will have 7 cards in it. If you don't like your opening hand, if you don't think it's very good, you're allowed to do something called a mulligan, where you shuffle back in your 7 cards, redraw 7, and then put a card onto the bottom from your hand onto the bottom of your deck for every mulligan you've done. I like this hand, so I'm gonna keep it, so I'm not gonna mulligan. It has a nice mixture of lands. It has spells. It has an enchantment in here, which we haven't talked about, but when I play it, I'll go into what enchantments are. But basically, they're kind of like creatures, where they come into play. They usually have some kind of passive ability, and they're not like instant sorceries where they immediately go into the graveyard. They stay in play. So we're just going to play this island here. We have an instant that we're going to cast during our opponent's turn. So our opponent is going to Agonizing Remorse, which allows him to take a card from our hand and then exile it. So they're taking my enchantment. So I guess I won't actually be playing that enchantment, which is fine. So at our end step, we're going to opt. And getting another opt is fine. Another Stern Dismissal. So we're just going to play another land, and then we're just going to pass the turn again. We have another opt that we're probably once again going to do to our opponents. So this is an enchantment, Treacherous Blessing, so it has an ability where when it enters it draws 3 cards, and then it just has a passive ability whenever you cast a spell. But since it became the target of something, now they have to sacrifice it. So they'll just draw 3 cards here. Crash through. Another card we can't really play yet. So we're just going to play a land and say go. Unfortunately, we haven't gone into combat yet. Soul Guide Lantern. Sure. So this is an artifact. Artifacts are just like enchantments and creatures, where they enter the battlefield, where you play them, and they remain on the battlefield, and they don't go into the graveyard unless they're destroyed. I'm gonna opt again. There's a red source, so we're gonna keep that. I'm gonna play this mountain. I'm going to play Sprite Dragon. Alright, so now we're going to go to combat. And so what you see here on the creature is that on the left is its power, on the right is its toughness, generally speaking, creatures can't attack on the first turn they're played, but since this has haste, it can attack. And in the combat situation, if he were to say have another, so he's going to look first. Okay, so he's going to destroy. So now he has blockers. However, where he has 2 creatures in play, and his creatures could potentially block my Sprite Dragon. However, my Sprite Dragon has flying, so he can't actually block it. So this is an instant, and it's also a land, but don't really pay too much attention to that. Sprite Dragon has an ability that when I cast a non-creature spell, it gets a +1/+1 counter. And non-creature spells are basically any spell that's not a creature. So in combat, let's say he had a creature that was able to block Sprite Dragon, or if my Sprite Dragon were to block, say, his soldier, which it can't because it's currently tapped, it would look for how combat is won is determined based on each creature's power and then each creature's toughness. So since my creature is a 2/2 and his creature is a 1/1, so now it's a 3/3. So, and his is a 1/1. If he were to block Sprite Dragon, let's say hypothetically, his creature would deal 1 power to my creature's toughness, and my creature would deal 3 damage to his 1 toughness. So my creature would have 2 toughness left, and his creature would be at -2 since his toughness went below 0. His creature would die. That's pretty much combat and everything. It can get a little bit more complex. So I would just play a land and say go. So that's pretty much combat. How combat works. Pass the turn. So yeah. Opponent has a crap ton of So that's basically the gist of of how a game would go. Whenever you're not able to successfully block something, that creature deals damage from its power to your life total. And that's basically how you would get to 0. So that's kind of the basis of card types, how combat works. Let's see if we can play more. And then there are quite a few series of keywords that each card has. One that you saw that I was using was flying and haste. Haste basically means that it can attack or be tapped the turn it comes into play. Usually creatures have to wait one turn. They have what's called summoning sickness, where they can't attack the first turn they come into play. So this hand is very bad. So this hand, we're going to mulligan. This hand, I will keep. And probably been. Bone Crusher Giant. So, a card like Bone Crusher Giant was a card from a set called Throne of Eldraine, where they had this mechanic called Adventure. Ruin Crab. Is he gonna try to kill me to death? That's not. Okay. So since he's playing a mechanic that we're not really gonna get into yet, we're just going to get past this. He has an alternate win con with this Ruin Crab that we're not really interested in. This is a unique land where it says it enters the battlefield tapped. And when it enters, so a land like this is split, so we can add either red or blue, whereas usually one would just, he's playing Arachne. Chainweb Arachne. So this card has Reach, and Reach is a mechanic where a creature with Reach can block creatures with flying. So since my Sprite Dragon has flying, okay, I don't know what he's doing. Alright, so he's choosing to block with the Chain Rat of Arachnia. So my creature is going to deal 2 damage to his 2 toughness, and he's going to deal 1 damage to my creature's 2 toughness. So this will equal 0, this will equal 1. So his Arachnia will be destroyed, and my Sprite Dragon will have 1 damage marked on it. And damage goes away at each end step, or at the end of each opponent, at the end of each player's turn. Just to make sure he doesn't have anything silly though. We're going to liberate. I kind of like both of these. So that. Let them deal damage. Alright. So that's how combat works. So now let's see if we can get our opponent down to 0 before they can get us down to 0. So he's gonna play a Stoneforcer. Oh, okay. Or they'll just concede. Which I guess is also another way to win, is that your opponent can also just concede. So yeah, so that's kind of the basis of kind of the beginning of Magic. Kind of how the first turns go, how combat works. Generally speaking, when it comes to like opening hands and stuff like that, I guess we'll get into those kind of things in future videos. When it comes to like what kind of opening hands would you keep, and then also going over some of the other keywords that kind of pop up as well, kind of the more popular ones. There are a few obscure ones for each like Magic set usually comes with a few of its own unique keywords, but we'll go over kind of the ones that are called evergreen, the ones that will constantly be in sets. So yeah, so that's it for this YouTube video. Make sure to like it and drop a comment on other kind of things that you think are kind of crucial for learning how to play Magic. Like I said, the next video will probably be going over what kind of hands are kind of desirable and the other kind of popular keywords, and also going more into some of the other card types that we didn't really focus on in this video. So if you're watching on YouTube, hopefully we will see you on the next how-to video.